This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation. We're going to talk to educators who are in the early childhood space. As someone who went to an early childhood program in Los Angeles back in the late 1960s, early 70s, I had a chance to see personally what it did for me and a number of children. But in my other leadership roles, I saw the importance of early childhood education. But you're not here to hear what I have to say. You're here to listen what educators have to say. So with that, what we're going to do is do a round robin. Each person is going to tell you his or her name, where they work or the state, and then we'll get started. And so what I'll do is I'll start with Daniel, and we'll go from there.
Yes, sir. My name is Daniel Leija. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I teach at Baylor Elementary in the Northside Independent School District.
Thank you. Tabatha.
Hi, I'm Tabatha Rosproy. I'm the 2020 National Teacher of the Year, and I teach preschool in Winfield, Kansas. I have a 4-year-old program that's housed inside of a nursing home.
Okay. Betty.
Hi, I'm Betty Ann LaPenna, and I teach kindergarten in North Haven, Connecticut.
Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Oliver Burnim, and I'm an instructional specialist in Maryland.
Okay. Luisa.
Hi, I am Luisa Palomo-Hare. I teach dual language kindergarten in Omaha, Nebraska.
And Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Ferguson. I teach second grade in the Schenectady City School District in New York.
In New York. So I've got something in common with most of you because I've either traveled or worked or lived in your state. So it's always good to see the friendly face from a great state. So here's the first question, and anyone can take it. What attracted you to early childhood education? You know, I began my teaching career as a 5th grade school teacher, and people thought that as early childhood. I'm like, it's earlier than middle, and all fact you all laugh, you know what I mean? What attracted you? And anyone can go.
I'll go first.
Thank you.
So I can actually picture myself having my epiphany moment in front of my elementary school. And I realized that teachers were so incredibly important to me as a young child, due to family background and where I had lived, that I realized that that's exactly what I wanted to do for children. I wanted to be that person that they could depend on every single day to raise them up and give them their self-worth and show them that they're important in this world and they are able to do great things. It sounds kind of hokey, but that was it. That I wasn't thinking about teaching reading, writing, or math. I was really thinking about how I was going to make those kids feel important.
Great.
I'd like to go next. So I have 2 defining moments, and it's a lot like what Betty said. I remember back when I was in 2nd grade, my teacher, Mrs. Marino, had taught a math lesson, and the little girl next to me, Audrey, said she didn't understand it. So I was like, oh, let me explain it to you. And it worked. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't believe that I could explain that and she understood it. So from then on, I did not want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a ballerina. But teaching was always second. It was always like, or a teacher. And then finally, when I was just about to go into college, my youngest sister, Elizabeth, was graduating from pre-K. And she got on the stage with all those little tiny children. And they all did a song and a dance. And I thought, yep, that's what I want to do. I want to make kids feel so confident that they'll get on a stage and dance in front of a bunch of grown-ups. So for me, it was sort of always second place until I finally realized, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do.
For me, I kind of always wanted to be a teacher. I was the little girl who had my dolls and my stuffed animals lined up, and they had to listen to whatever I was reading or teaching them on any given day. I also had a daycare teacher who was really special in my life, who let me be a little mini teacher well into, when I became a teenager, and I would go back and volunteer in the summer. So it's always been something there within me. When I went to college, I started doing some summer jobs and working in day camps. And I knew then that just kind of the curiosity from young learners, from their zest for life and just the joy that it motivates me. And it makes me want to give my best and do my best. And if that was a feeling that I could have every day, then I was ready to sign up for that.
I'll jump in next. I knew that I always wanted to live a life of service, and I wanted to work with young kids at an early age. I had some really formative experiences as a child in rural Western Nebraska, volunteering in a migrant farm working summer school program, which then led me to study abroad in a developing country during college. And then I thought, if we are fortunate enough to have a public school system where we can reach so many children, why not start as early as possible? And kindergarten is, in my state, it's the earliest that kids are required to go to school. So I was able to jump right in kindergarten, and 17 years later, I am as happy as I was my first year, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
I love hearing these stories. This is one of my favorite things to listen to teachers talk about. My sort of moment was when I was in high school. I was taking a dual credit college Spanish class, and part of our work that we did was to travel down the block to the local preschool and teach Spanish to those students. And before we started doing that, we got to observe the teacher in the classroom for a while, and I was in complete awe of this teacher, Miss Pat Walton, who has since retired. I finally was on sort of the observation end of education. I'd always been delivered content, and now I got to see teaching for the art form that it was. And I got to watch her teach preschool, and I got to watch her move around the classroom and engage with her students, and really affect their learning in such a meaningful way, when it seemed like what she was really doing was guiding them to the things that they needed to know. And after I saw that, I knew that education was something that I wanted to be a part of.
Well, the females, y'all got, okay. The gentleman go last. I'm on a mission. I'm a survivor. If I get emotional, it's because I truly believe in teaching. Had two defining moments. I've come from a very poor family. Low point in our family's life was having to live in a boxcar, a train boxcar for 4 months because my dad couldn't find housing. So subsequently, I didn't have much of a background in learning or reading or anything. So in second grade, I found myself as a non-reader. I couldn't read. I didn't know what the words were. And I had a teacher that I still maintain contact with. She's 92 years old, Mrs. Brown. She would take me down to the boiler room. There was a boiler room right there in that little school, and she would take me there every day and taught me the love of reading. And I finally got to be a reader, and I started loving reading. But the problem was I was kind of falling behind as I was going up the line, up through the grade levels. And it culminated my freshman year in high school in algebra class. I just didn't know it. I didn't have a background. And my teacher took great pride in not only marking my papers up with red pens, he made the comment that I was worthless and I was dumb and I was never going to amount to anything. And so at that moment, I had two choices. And choice number one, I was going to prove him right. And choice number two, I was going to prove him wrong. So I was on a mission from that point forward. And I had to go through the military to be able to go to college. And so I toughed it out for 20 years, did college full, part-time working, and finally got my degree. And so my mission in life is I don't want my kids to ever experience that. So I specialize in math and science. I specialize in bringing math and science scores up. And I target my young ladies because I had read a report one time that said that the reason that 90% of young ladies don't go to college is because they're scared of math. And so I tell my kids at the beginning of the year, my goal is not to teach you math. My goal is to make you love math and to want to do math. And you're going to love it by the end of the year because I'm going to show you 4 or 5 ways to get to the answer. And if you can show me a way to make sense, I'm good with it. And so my kids are successful and it works, but I just don't want them to ever experience what I did. I want them to go out and be confident with themselves with their skills. And I think that should be our goal.
First of all, let me thank each one of you for opening up your personal story in life because you did not have to. Daniel, it's okay. If you get emotional, that's all right. We're here for that. I didn't learn to read or write in a real way until I was 20 and had to go to community college. And so I know firsthand the challenges and the embarrassment that comes along with that. Starting early is young with the fundamentals. And all of you at some point touched on reading. Here's actually one question. How many of you come from a home where you had an educator? Okay, and so just good for the viewing and listening audience to know, those who are listening, no one raised their hand. And so how many of you are first gen college grads? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 of the 6. We often think that all of our teachers aren't first gen. We know that's not the case. So thanks for sharing that. Fundamentally, students have to learn early. Daniel, you hit the part about learning the challenges with math, because if you can't read, word problems or things will become a problem. What do you do at your grade level to instill not only confidence, but the love to learn when young people often can be scared for not wanting to? And that's for anyone.
I'll go ahead and jump in today since I am newly doing this. This is my 3rd day of in-person teaching. We were remote until Monday of this week. And so I'm very much with students who, while they've known me since August, this is their first time in the classroom. And I will absolutely say that the more that I show my love of learning, the more that I show my fear when I don't know if I'm going to be good at math, or I don't know if I'm going to be good at science, but I show them that I'm willing to try, and I really set that environment for the kiddos. The magic really happens after they've seen teachers model that. They do it for each other. And today, day 3, we were trying to show a technology activity, and one of my little guys said, "Hold on, Miss Plumma, I'll teach our new kid how to do it," and promptly walked up to the active board and did a quick 2-minute lesson on how to log on to Seesaw for our new kiddo today. So really setting that environment with our own genuine love of what we do, I think really helps our kiddos be able to feel safe to do that as well.
I absolutely agree, Luisa. Oh, do you want to go ahead, Katie?
No, go ahead, you first.
Okay. I was just going to kind of tack onto that, in addition to showing like your genuine love for learning. One of my favorite researchers, Dr. Becky Bailey, says that willingness comes from connection. And so everything that we do in the classroom is built on those connections and relationships we make with our students. And academic success is absolutely dependent on the relationships that you build and that you maintain throughout the year. And so, yeah, in addition to you showing them what's exciting about learning and what you can do, just remembering to make that relationship building and that social emotional learning an intentional part of your day, just like your academic content.
So I definitely agree, Tabatha. Those connections and relationships are absolutely key. And I think, and this goes with what you've both said, words are really important. So that modeling and using the right words for kids, like Luisa was saying, as you work through a problem, also works into when you are working through problems with them. I was doing a math topic yesterday that was so hard for them. We were taking out 10 to subtract, and they were really struggling. And I just stopped and said, I am so proud of all of your struggling. I see your math brains working. And I could just see the tension ease from them, because it's how you approach it and the words you use. I could have said, oh my goodness, let's start over. But if you turn it around and put it into a positive light and use the right words with them, they know how to move forward and feel more confident from there. It's so important to teach them how to talk to themselves through your own words. I love your struggles. I see your struggles. Let's break it down. Who took out 10 first? And then they feel confident because they did that. And you lead them through how to work through it on their own so they can hear your words and then bring them into themselves and use them for themselves as well.
Kim, in your opening, you mentioned that you got to start working with daycare. And there are some people who don't see or don't differentiate daycare from early childhood learning. You or others can elaborate for us. Is there a difference? And if so, what is it?
So I think.
Okay, go ahead, Kim. I was going to
ahead,
go.
Tabatha.
Extroverting is like, it's quiet. I'm her dog.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share, because I know you would be the perfect person. I think that the main thing that we want for all kids to have is quality early childhood education and to have opportunities. And whether that's happening in a daycare, whether that's happening in a pre-K, whether it's happening in a public school, Head Start, I think we want all kids to have access and opportunity. And I think that's what it's all about.
Tabatha?
That is a perfect answer. I think that anytime anybody says you're just something, that's really diminishing to the other party that they're speaking about. And so when somebody says, as an early childhood educator, you're just daycare, that's really diminishing to what daycare workers do, because we both serve very, very important functions in our society, albeit they're different. They have overlapping themes. And like Kim said, we definitely want kids to have opportunities and access, and however that's possible, we want them to get it, and we support that.
What COVID-19 has done in part, oh, go right ahead, Betty.
Oh, I was just going to say that one thing that I tell my families is that early childhood education really starts at birth. And, you know, we always say that parents are their child's first teacher. Well, that is really true. And I think the more that we can relay to parents how important that is, the more it's going to be effective. So for anybody to say that anyone who's not, you know, in the grades of, you know, elementary school to not be an early childhood educator is really not easy to hear. And I think that we are, as a kindergarten teacher, I'm building on every experience that they've had prior to me, regardless of how great that experience is or it's not great. And I need to take that child, how I get them, and try to get them as far as they can go. So I've always said early childhood education is critical. So letting parents know that I believe that it starts with them, I find is a really helpful tack to use. And it's been very powerful in my experience.
If I can jump in real quick, Gerard, I'm really proud of something that Nebraska's been doing. You know, you think of Nebraska, it's in the middle of the country, but it's a really big state. It's about 8 hours across the state. I should know because I was born on one end and I live on the other end now. But Warren Buffett and some other benefactors have put money into an institute called the Buffett Early Childhood Institute, which I've been lucky enough to partner closely with for the last 7 years. And their tagline is making Nebraska the best place to be a baby, where they're exactly focused on what you just asked us. You know, what is the difference between daycare and elementary school and early childhood? And really, how can we elevate both? How can we offer support and services to our daycare providers so that they are given the support they need, the resources they need? But then how can we also have that continuum, that birth through third grade continuum, to make sure that there's consistent support services? So as they're transitioning from a daycare center into a preschool center, into a K-3 school, they really have that continuity of care. And it's been really fascinating to see what the group has done. And they've now branched off. They do a lot on economics of early childhood. Most recently during COVID, they've done a lot about the stress of being an early childhood educator or daycare provider in times of pandemic, in times of COVID. So I would encourage everybody watching this to just go and Google Buffett Early Childhood Institute. They have a lot of really good resources out there.
And I'm glad you mentioned two things. One, the COVID-19 connection, because when Kim mentioned daycare and early childhood, here in Virginia, the governor used some of our money from CARES to support people who work in daycare. And others saying, well, what about education? Not only intentionally, it created questions of why us versus them. So you guys have helped connect that. And then you also mentioned Warren Buffett. When I was working in state government in Virginia, it was amazing how interested business people were in early childhood education in ways I did not see often in high school, or see in ways, want to hold it up again?
Yes.
Giving kids a fair chance. This is for the listeners.
Yes, it's by James Heckman, and it's he is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and he argues that the accident of birth is the greatest source of inequality in America today. It's so fascinating. It's a tiny little book. Everybody should read it. It is just the best thing, but it hits on your point about business leaders caring about early childhood.
And what's interesting is they care about it in ways we may not find per se in high school, and this is workforce readiness. We got it middle school. Why do you think now educators and business people are so interested now in early childhood versus, I'd say, 20 years ago?
We're at a totally different time frame now. Back when we went to school, If you remember, we were the blue collar workers, and the schools were based on factories. You had bells that rang, and so that was getting you processed for when you went to these factories, you do the bells. But now we're in a totally different arena. A matter of fact, I find it interesting that there was a study that said that it's like 75% of the jobs that today's kindergartners are going to have haven't even been invented yet. And so how do we approach that? Yeah, the businesses want us to get those kids prepared. And so you're not going to be able to do that so much with academics as it is, especially down in kindergarten first. It's so important to get that playtime in, to get that interaction time in, to have conflict so that they learn how to resolve conflict, which is going to carry on and they're going to build on until they get out to the workplace. And I think that's the key thing is to get those relationships built so that the kids know how to react and they know how to deal with stress and they know how to deal with working with others, because it's now a team concept in all these jobs you go into, and they're having to work together in order to make the product. If they don't make the product, the business fails.
You know what's so funny about being on a Zoom call? For those of you who will not see this, I can just see everyone's head nodding in agreement. That's what I see. That's what you get when you get a bunch of like-minded people on a call. And I just totally agree with what you're saying, Daniel. That's been a huge push in Kansas to get away from the factory, like Henry Ford model of education. And I just think another reason that business leaders are so interested is because we're in a childcare crisis. There are 3.5 million kids that are 4 years old that don't have access to any kind of education at all. And so then we're relying on childcare centers or daycare providers to do that. And when you have, like, my small rural community of about 12,000, we have one center and just a few home daycares. And so families can't work. They can't make money at their business. They can't be productive. So absolutely, early childhood education is a community issue. It has everything to do with the workforce, and business leaders are right to want to invest and be interested in furthering the interests of our kids from birth to age 8 and beyond.
You're rural.
Also, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're rural. Who else is rural? Okay, so other ones are urban. Go right ahead, Luisa.
I was just going to add, I think that there's a lot more research out there about what happens to early childhood brains on the first part, right? So we know more than we did 20 years ago about early intervention. And again, from an economic standpoint, if we invest early in putting money into things like Head Start or into universal pre-Ks or really well-funding schools that serve early childhood children, we're really doing our own communities and our country a favor down the road by having a more engaged, educated workforce, because we now know that so much learning happens in those first 5 years. So many brain connections are made. So if we can really invest early, it's going to pay off for a long time.
And the research shows that following kids from early childhood who have been in quality programs, that more so than academics, there are lifelong benefits to having that early childhood experience, from going to college to being a healthier adult to being a more productive participant in the workforce, having higher self-esteem, health outcomes. The list goes on. So I think we are now acknowledging and recognizing the research that did exist 20 years ago, but I think we're now kind of to acknowledge the benefit of it.
A couple of you mentioned Head Start. We know a number of children are in the program. There's some research to point that the benefits of it go up till, let's say, 3rd grade and begins to wane afterwards. When you hear a report like that, what are your responses? Because some people say, well, that means Head Start is working. Some are saying Head Start works, but there's a handoff challenge. They're leaving one quality program, but is it aligned with where kids are going for elementary school? What are your thoughts?
So I worked for Head Start for 4 years, and Head Start is an incredible program. Not only what it does for students, but what it does for families. And so my questions, I actually recently read an article when I was doing some research that made a similar claim. And I think that sometimes it might be a handoff issue. You go from this system of full wraparound support that's funded by the federal government into, a public school that may be funded by the state government that lacks the funding and the resources. When I worked for Head Start, we had a play therapist, a nutritionist, full-time home visitors assigned to every class. I mean, just as much wraparound services you can imagine. And so, you know, building that healthy foundation is so important, but I think it just proves that those services would be worth even investing a little bit in further on, and looking to see at that research, where are the deficits? What are the areas that we're lacking in? So I definitely don't think that negates the positive impact that Head Start has. I think it just proves that it's worth it and necessary.
And I saw it as when I was teaching kindergarten at my first campus. We had kids that were in the Head Start program and others that came straight into kinder, and there was a huge difference. I mean, they came in prepared. They knew letters and sound, you know, the letter formations and the sounds and everything. And so you didn't spend so much time with them. You could just, they were zooming along, that you were trying to get the other kids back up to speed. So yeah, Head Start is a phenomenal start for these kids, and it really puts them ahead when they get into public school, where they're not struggling quite so much.
I think Tabatha really hit the nail on the head, though, because as a second grade teacher, you know, when you started talking about resources, it brought to mind that we had last year, before COVID hit, one reading teacher for 500 students. So we definitely, I think that if there is a gap, it has to do with equity and being able to provide the same resources in a public school that you might have at a Head Start program. We don't have those resources. We have one social worker for 500 kids. We have one psychologist for 500 kids. And when you don't have the resources to continue that wraparound effect and education that they're getting in Head Start, then naturally there's going to be a decline if you aren't able to support the kids in the way that they need.
Tabatha and another of you mentioned families, and people forget the schools for students. That's one aspect, but you're also educating families. You want to share any stories or best practices of what other early childhood educators could think about when they're working with families at this level?
Yeah. I want to take the lead on that one. I taught at one of the toughest schools there is, one of the toughest elementary schools there is. It was a gang-ridden neighborhood. We had to go on lockdown at least once or twice a month when ATF ran the drug runners, and they would run through our playground. It was a very, very tough school. Matter of fact, it was so tough. Our parking lot was fenced in, and we had to lock it at 8 o'clock in the morning because people would steal cars. And so you were really up against a lot. And the thing was, I was able to really make a connection with that community because of the fact that not only did I teach the kids, I basically made them, you're my kids. Eric Jensen tells us that the one thing that children of poverty lack and reach out for the most is a strong, stable, caring adult figure in their life. And most often it's teachers that they reach out to fill that void. So I as an educator, you find yourself going to ballet, recitals, you go into all the things that the kids do in Little League. And once they see that, hey, not only do they care about my kid, they care about us, that community accepted me. Now, I'm going to share a story, and I usually break into tears over this one. I was so well known in that community, and I'm telling you, it was a tough community. People didn't want to go there after dark. It was a Saturday night, and my wife and I were watching TV, and I got a phone call. And it was from a parent of a student that I'd had a few years before. And she called and she said, Dan, or Mr. Leija, Chris is in trouble. He just gotten beat up by his parents. And I immediately jumped up and started running for the door. And my wife told me, you can't go. I said, I'm safe. That community knows me. I'm safe. She goes, I don't want you to go. I said, I'm safe. It'll be okay. And I actually made it there about 3 minutes before the police did. And all he needed was somebody just to hug him and hold him, just to tell him, hey, it's okay. You're with somebody safe now. And so we sat there and we talked and held on to him until they got there and took him. A year later, the middle school right across the street from us. And it was a Friday afternoon, and the kids had just gone home, and I was sitting on a bench, and here comes Chris. And as he said, hey, Mr. Leija, I said, hey, Chris, how are you? And we just sat there for about 5 minutes. Not a word was exchanged. And after about 5 minutes, he stood up. He says, "I just wanted to say thanks," and walked off. And those are the moments, those are the defining moments that tell you really making a big impact with the kids, with the parent, and with the community. You've got to be involved with that community to let them know you care about every single kid they have. I'm sorry.
That is a beautiful story, Daniel, and your emotions are welcome here. And they are valid. As a person who cries like every day, it's refreshing to see someone also get emotional about their job. I so agree that that familial connection and your connection to your community is super important. And I think that our purpose as educators is shifting in the way that we talked about sort of the Henry Ford factory model. We need to be reflecting on what is our collective purpose as teachers, looking at what our kids' needs are and being responsive to those. And I think if we look at even the nationwide data on how many ACEs, like adverse childhood experiences, students have, that is around 25%, higher in some places, lower in others. That's 25% too many. And that's just usually like having 2 or more. So millions and millions of children are going through some kind of trauma, and family dynamics are changing. So I think maybe our dynamic in our school needs to be changing a little bit too, and being more responsive to those needs, because that's what we do. Public schools were founded on the idea of equity and bridging gaps in our community, and the way that we're going to do that is by reaching families.
I'll follow you, Tabatha. I absolutely agree. And I also want to thank Daniel for being open and so honest and vulnerable with us. I think a key word that we all know, but we take for granted, is intentionality, right? Like, we have to be intentional about reaching out to families, because we're never taught this in college, no matter how recent or how long ago it was that we were in our pre-service classes. We don't take classes on how to connect with a family. And then we suddenly get thrown into a classroom and we're told how many minutes we have to teach math and how many minutes we have to teach writing, but we're not told how to make time to connect with families. And so it really is finding ways that work for you and your school community to be intentional. If you're lucky enough to be at my school, you're across from the Children's Museum. So you invite families to come with you every month when you go to for your monthly visit, and we do partnerships where they get memberships and we get to go with them. But just really being intentional and understanding that for a lot of families, not all families, but for a lot of families, they might not have had the best experience themselves in school. And so really, as educators, it's on us to not just teach their children, to really welcome families and empower families and let them know that we are on a journey together, and that our connection with family is as important as teaching math. And it is as important as whether or not we can get their child to be a reader.
And I think just the willingness to learn from families, that we don't know it all as teachers, and that parents really are the number one experts on their children. And having that willingness to learn, having that willingness to be culturally responsive to all of the different families that we work with, and to check our own implicit bias that we might have, and to see kids and families for who they are, I think goes a long way and is appreciated. I remember when I started teaching at a new school and teaching kindergarten, and none of the families wanted the kids in my class because they didn't know me. They didn't know anything about me. I didn't speak another language. And I had to prove myself and show them that I was there for their kids. And, a few years down the line, they were marching their other children to my classroom. And I'm like, no, I'm not their teacher this year. And they're going to the principal's office. So I think once you show families that you have that same goal, and that you really truly are their partner in more than just words, but also in your actions as well, then they give you that trust of their most precious gift, their kids.
Mhm.
And I think it goes back to the question about how we make kids feel important. And part of that is letting them know that not only are they important, but their family is important too. And that we're going to make that connection among all of us. And I think the struggle right now with COVID is that we have to find more creative ways to make that connection. Parents aren't able to come into my classroom this year. I'm the ability to contact with them in person and in different activities and getting them involved in their children's education in the classroom is not happening. So I think it would be really helpful to teachers all over is if we can come up with some more creative ways to get that family involved at this time, because it is even more critical now than it was before.
Yeah, Betty, I just want to share something that we did that if there are silver linings of COVID, this would for sure be the top of my list. Our district provided iPads with cellular connectivity for 54,000 children, which gave us the opportunity to be in their homes every day. And so I started and ended my day every day with a quick family meeting. So all families who were able would come to the screen. And now that we're in a hybrid model, we made a district-wide decision that we would start the day with 20 minutes of a morning meeting. So it's a responsive classrooms model. But it's been so great these last 3 days to see how many parents still hop on and join the morning meeting with us. Even though their child is in my classroom, they still want to join in and find out, like, what are we talking about today? You know, what's our favorite food? And so thinking about going forward, if I had a child in kindergarten and the teacher said, if you want to hop on your phone for the first 20 minutes and just say hello to your kid in the class, how great is that? You know, so just thinking creatively going forward. I wouldn't have thought that 6 months ago. I would have never asked a parent, do you want to FaceTime in? But now that we've done it for 6 weeks and parents like that, it's a silver lining, if you will.
If someone turned on the computer right now or the podcast and had no idea what grade level you're speaking of, you all speak as if you're working with high school students or older students, when in fact you're working with young people, and you did it seamlessly, which basically is telling us that you believe that young people may be young in age, but you're still teaching, speaking, and working with them as if they are in fact human beings being young people. Talk to me about that, because no one said I'm talking down to them, I teach them this way. You set no bars, you set no low expectations. And we often think because they're early childhood students, we have to treat them differently. Doesn't sound like that with all of you. What are your thoughts, Katie?
My thought is that children are brilliant. They are just brilliant. I tell them, I look forward to hearing what they are thinking every day. So when they're working with me on reading or math or writing, whatever they say comes from a place of their own knowledge, their schema, and whatever it is that we're working on, their answers have value. So when I'm working with those students, the first and most important thing that I tell them is how brilliant they are. Children are brilliant no matter their age.
Okay.
I also think the older kids get, the older we get, the more afraid we are. We're afraid to be wrong. We're afraid to look foolish. We're afraid. And the younger kids are, the less they're afraid. And so that allows them, like Katie said, to be brilliant. They think about things in the most creative ways that we don't think about as adults. The way that they solve problems are so distinctly different than anybody else, because we follow a set path. We follow a cookie cutter path. If my car breaks, I take it to the shop, the end of the story. Kids have these very tricky ways and say, okay, if my car breaks, I could do A, B, or C. And they have a billion plans if plan A doesn't work, you know, but the older we get, we just get, you know, that fear in us. And so you're right. We do work with brilliant little kids who just, if we remain open to it, we could change the world because of what they're teaching us.
I love the movie Stand and Deliver when Jaime Escalante said that the students will rise to the expectation of the teacher. And I just thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful line. And so in my classroom, yeah, I do set the bar high. I set the bar extremely high, but I tell the kids, you're going to make it over it, because I'm going to go over it with you. And you know what? If you don't get it today, that's okay, because physically you're growing about the same rate, but here in our brain, we're connecting at different times. You might get it now. You might get it at Christmas. You might not get it till next spring. But you know what? We're going to keep trying, and I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm going to be encouraging to try, and you're going to make that connection, and we're going to celebrate it. And so when they see that there's buy-in and that I can be a part of this, and I don't have to be afraid to try, because if I fail, and I show them, hey, I goof up. I goof up every day, and I share my goof ups with them so that they say, "Oh wow, the teacher, is a human too." Once they've seen that, they're more apt to do for the buy-in, and they will perform to your level. They want to perform. They want to be the best. So I think that is it. It's the high expectations, but let them know that we're going to have failures along the way, but we're gonna baby step it, and we're all going to make it there together.
I think building on what you both just said too is, that sort of noticing versus judging, right? Kids are lacking, and when they're young, of that like self-awareness that other people think what they're doing is weird or think that it's strange. And we talk to them like they are the sweetest and kindest and most brilliant, people on earth, because they are, and all kids deserve that. And I think that people who work with the younger grades in early childhood from 0 to 8 are really, they're doing it right. So often people think, well, that's baby stuff, or that's stuff you do to little kids, but it's what all kids need. I think that people could be looking to us in the early childhood field to see how to help kids shift from that self-judgment to a place of just knowing and noticing their mistakes and moving forward.
I totally agree with you, Tabatha. I think we spend so much time in education thinking about standards that kids need to hit. If they need this in 5th grade, then let's back math it and see what they need to do in 4th and 3rd and 2nd and 1st. And here's what you're going to do in kindergarten teachers. But I think if we stop trying to push down and push some of the practices that we do in early childhood up into the grades, that students would benefit from that.
It's almost backwards, isn't it, Kim? Because in math, in early childhood, we got those manipulatives out, we got the blocks out, and the kids are touching it, because Gardner tells us we have 8 ways that we can learn. And we nurture that so much in elementary school. But what happens when they get to the upper grade levels? I did have one of my kids come back, because I do let them come back if they have questions. And I said, well, remember when they did this? Well, our teacher said that we can't use blocks because blocks are for kindergartners. And this was a 7th grader. I was like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? So those kids really need to manipulate that. They need to be able to see it and understand how it works. So when that's stifled, I think that stops the curiosity and the learning process. Yes, it does need to go up. It really, really does.
I was thinking of an example of how we learn something from young people just in a moment. My oldest daughter is 27. She was just here from California. And I said, I remember the time when she would have been 4, and we were brushing our teeth. And she says, where's my teeth brush? I said, it's your toothbrush. She said, no, it's my teeth brush. I said, why? She said, because I have more than one tooth to brush. I sat there and gargled because I had no answer. But I like what you just said, Kim, about teaching up. I can tell you from a policy perspective, we don't think about that. So I've got a takeaway that I'm going to share with a few friends of mine based on this conversation. We know that we would love to have more finances than we have. So just assume you won't get any additional finances for the next 2 years. Just assume that's the standard. What can we do to support the work you're doing? But what challenges will still remain in place even if we were able to give you the resources you want? So one is resource lacking. Other is we'll give you the resources, but there's still challenges. What are some of those?
I'll jump in first. I think the more that you can protect early childhood, the better. And Kim touched on this when she said we keep pushing down, and we make 5-year-olds be shorter versions of their future selves instead of honoring that magical age where they are a 5-year-old. So, from a policy perspective, putting practices that allow kids to be kids, right? Allowing play in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, allowing for some flexibility where maybe we cut a little bit of the math minutes to devote it to a social emotional learning curriculum, so that we are being intentional about time to teach kids how to problem solve, teach them how to name their emotions. Really, we're never going to have all the money that we need, but we know that we have these kiddos for 8 hours a day. So what can we do to protect the time with them so that we're able to do what we know is best practice for kids and not just treating them like shorter versions of their future self?
I would challenge politicians I would tell them, don't fund me for 3 years. Don't fund me, but remove the shackles and let me teach. Get rid of all the extraneous data that we have to do. We spend so much time on data. We are data driven. that we're not allowed that time that we need to really work with our kids and interact with them and take them out and let them do things because we're so, okay, they've got to meet these checkpoints. That's not what education is about. Education is about exploring, about thinking, about questioning things, about working it through rather than getting so many problems. And if we were allowed the reign to teach and not have to worry about all the extra added forms that we have to fill out, I think they would see a big increase. We went through that in 2011. Texas had a $5.7 billion cut in education. That was huge, but we found ways around it. We said, okay, we're just going to work with what we have, and the kids did well. So it's not about the money; it's about letting us teach.
I think that specifically, none of our schools are funded properly. In Kansas, we have not been fully funded in many, many years, though we're moving in the right direction. But I know that I'm speaking for most people in the nation when I say that. I'm going to speak to preschool specifically here because we are often something that's on the chopping block, unlike our K through 12 counterparts in my state, which receive state funding. And most of what I do is grant funded or funded through the special education cooperative, depending on how many kids that I have with special needs. But if I'm doing my job really well, I don't have as many kids with special needs. So it's kind of this, this sort of catch-22 that we're in this situation. And I think that we should never have to deprioritize one thing in education in order to prioritize something else. The funding question, there should be funding for everything that's proven to be good for children. But when we're not, I mean, we're in this reality that there's not. So I would just encourage people to not let early childhood be something that you consider shaving off of. Look in the other places that you can do some shaving, kind of like we would do with the minutes. That is not ideal, but I understand that it's the situation that we're in. And look at some of those community partnerships that you can invest into. For instance, like my classroom is housed inside of a nursing home. They still pay my salary at the district and the co-op, but that building was paid for by the nursing home. And so while in the long run, I don't want any pre-K programs to be funded by grants. Like I have a dream of universal pre-K, universally free education for everyone. I think that there are some creative ways that we can involve our communities in the meantime. But while we do that, we need some advocates for this time. We need our legislators, we need our community members to be listening to talks like this and to be advocating for the early years in a child's life.
I'd like to jump in on that because you mentioned cutting pre-K, and that really hit a nerve with me because in New York, we're really struggling with a potential 20% cut straight across the board. And in my district, that is $28 million. We lost 200 teachers in our district 2 weeks before school started, and the first program that was cut, pre-K. So I do think that we need to advocate for our children. We need to advocate with legislators and the community, and to make sure that everybody sees the same value that we see for pre-K and early childhood education. It's absolutely stunning that this has been allowed to happen, and that our city school district, where kids are already struggling due to inequity, during the COVID quarantine, we had students we gave away 4,000 computers in my district, and there's 10,000 students. We're still working on giving away thousands of computers this year. I don't know where we're pulling those funds from, but I know that, if we want to make a change so that we're not losing our pre-K teachers and the 200 teachers we lost in my district, and in the country, the same financial crisis that we're facing, we need to advocate. We need to help other people like legislators and business and community members understand how incredibly important early childhood education is. We need to value the individual. I really think that the way that schools evaluate children at the lower levels is not appropriate to their chronological or emotional ages. It's not appropriate to be giving them numerical grades when they're only 7 years old. I would like to value their creativity, their collaboration, their communication, all of those things that are going to be 21st century skills for kids that haven't been invented yet, like Daniel said.
Is there a role? Oh, go right ahead.
Well, I was reflecting on our conversation right now, and it's like totally par for the course with teachers. None of us are saying how important it is that you and other policymakers stand up for us, for teachers, right? Like it's just par for the course. We're humble, we don't think about it, but really we need people advocating on behalf of us, advocating on the art and the magic and the science that early childhood educators are doing. Anybody can get up in front of adults and teach college, right? Like the college kids are invested, they're paying their money, they need to get a degree, but it takes a special kind of magical person to be able to teach young children and keep their attention and help them grow and learn in so many different ways. We need people out there saying, we need to support and protect these early childhood educators because what they do is not easy and it's not replaceable and it's not easy to find somebody who has that talent. So really making connections with early childhood teachers, highlighting them, profiling them, whether it's, an article in the paper or, a teacher of the month, whatever, something so that people can get a glimpse into our lives and what we do all day. I think about this quote, the face of the other demands an ethical response. If people knew what we were doing all day long, surely they would advocate for us and support us.
I think there's going to be a reality show coming out of this conversation because you've touched on so many points. What if, in fact, we followed one of you for a semester or for a year? They would see a lot more than we often know about this. And I will let my wife is a college professor. I'll let her know that Luisa says she has no magic and no swag. So I'll make sure she
has magic, arguably. Yes. She doesn't have to entertain as much because they're older and more invested.
No, teaching early childhood is like 90% theater. I say that all the time. I'm exhausted at the end of every day because I am the feature in a lot of the moments. So you have to really get creative.
Well, as we get ready to close out our conversation, I'll just give everyone a chance just to share some closing thoughts on what you've heard from your colleagues, maybe something we didn't touch that you want to. The floor is yours, and I'll work backward by starting with Katie.
Could someone else go first?
Oh, okay. We'll go with Betty. I think Betty's giving a hand. No, pick someone else.
All this time, I'm still fumbling with the mute button. I don't know. I am truly grateful to Catherine. I'm going to get emotional now. It's hard to believe that we met 20 years ago. And the fact that she thought of me to be part of this group is really special to me. So that's something that's at the forefront of my mind right now. But it's just great to be with a group of people who feel so passionately about the same things. I'm in a school, I think I'm the most veteran teacher at my school right now. And it's been very interesting to watch teachers grow. And I hope to bring back to my building tomorrow the passion that we've all shared tonight, because I think that's something that's so important and might be a little bit missing right now. So I think it's important to share that. And I'm just grateful that, Catherine got us together and that I've been able to experience this.
Thank you, Betty. Kim?
I think that from this evening, what I would close with is just opportunity and access, that our youngest learners deserve the best. And we are not going to be the society that we can be until we start giving them those opportunities. And so when funding is available, whenever that day rolls around, right? And in the meanwhile, we need to find a way to give our children a chance. And then the challenge that I think that one of the challenges that we face, I think, is this culture of testing and how that uniquely impacts early childhood education. In my work with supporting teachers now, that's one of the things that they complain about. Not that they don't get valuable information and need information from testing, but the amount of testing that we do on young children, even when there are state guidelines limiting the number of minutes that a child can spend on a test, it doesn't quite balance out in the early childhood classroom where the teacher is doing a test one-on-one with students because they can't read. They can't sit them down and sit the whole class at their desk and say, okay, take your test now. It's a one-on-one experience. And the more experiences that we have to meet some mandate that either a district or a state has required, the less time we spend with students teaching and learning, and doing what we're there for. So value the role of testing, but also value the role of teaching and learning, and let that take priority.
Thank you, Kim. Luisa?
I think in reflecting on tonight, the words joy and hope come to mind. Being together with all of you and how much we've laughed, and just working with children, you have to have big belly laughs every day because they are just the funniest little humans that you could ever be around. But there's also so much hope when you're around kids. And I think because we've been in a pandemic the last 6 months, because we've been isolated, and because I've been back in school with kids again for the last 3 days, I've just felt the joy and the hope, and it's just so contagious. You know, they're so excited about everything. They're excited about following the dots that help them stay socially distant. They're excited about running at recess because we can't play with toys at recess. You know, they're just so joyful and hopeful about everything. And it's good for everybody to be around that.
Thank you, Luisa. Tabatha?
I love what everyone said, so I just want to echo and ditto everything they've said. But I also just want to, use this unique opportunity to encourage teachers to advocate for themselves. I think that we are in a very interesting time in education where people are looking at us, sort of whether we like it or not. And I think that we need to use that opportunity not only to advocate for what we're doing in our classrooms, but for the good things that are going on in other people's classrooms too. So my friends who know the awesome early childhood things that are going on, talk about that too in your communities. You don't have to be the loudest voice at the board meeting in order to be an advocate. Your advocating can take place anytime, anywhere. But I think that we need a system of support in place for each other, so that we can use this time to our advantage, use this time when the eyes are on us to show what incredible things are happening in our schools, the resiliency, that joy, that hope, and use this time to advocate for what's most important to us.
Thank you, Tabatha. Daniel?
I was just so happy to be a part of this group with some incredible educators. I wanted to thank Catherine especially because this group came to me at the right time. I'm the squeaky wheel. I let my feelings be about the good things that are happening in our public schools, the good things that teachers are doing. And right now we have 2 pandemics going that I'm really worried about. First one's COVID. The second one's teacher burnout. If you think about it, we've got double everything. We're teaching not only the online kids, but now we have kids at the classroom. We're expected to be experts at brand new learning platforms we've never seen within a week and a half. They're bringing new platforms online, and they're bringing new ideas online. And then you have the forums, and you have the parent conferences, and teachers are burning out. I'm sorry, but teachers are really burning out. Myself, I'm learning on 4 hours of sleep a night. They chase me out of the school. I come home, I carry work home with me. I'm working till 10 o'clock at night. I'm back up at 2:30 in the morning, taping science labs in my kitchen till 5 o'clock when I have to go back to upload those science labs. And it's not only me, it's teachers, not only in our school. This is happening not only nationwide, but across the globe. And our teachers are holding basically the future in their hands. And if we're not there and we can't be there for our kids, then we've got a problem. So we really need to reach out and help our teachers in some way so that we can in turn help those kids be the models that we need, and that they can carry on when we quit teaching or we're retired.
Thank you, Daniel. Katie?
Okay, so first let me apologize for my cat that was distracting me. Sorry. So actually, I'm kind of glad I got to go last, because listening to everyone is so inspiring. We've touched on a lot of really important topics tonight. Close to my heart are relationships, which are so important to build, being a part of the community. Really important to think about equity, especially when it comes to early childhood education, because the gap begins to grow at that level. And one thing we didn't specifically say, but we said in many different ways, is to remember it's always Maslow before Bloom. We always have to think about the students' needs emotionally before their academic needs. And I would say that we should consider that with families as well. One of the most important things I learned in quarantine is to empathize and to support and understand the families who needed help. And as I was listening to you, I just jotted down some of your really important words for education: joy, magic, hope, brilliance, advocate, support, resilience. We hold the future in our hands. And I think that says it all.
Thank you, Katie. I would add the word, at least that I take away from this, is tenacious, because that's what I hear and that's what I feel. You know, one of the reports that we published at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Culture at the University of Virginia, where I work, is a national moral formation survey. And our scholars gathered data from 3,000 parents and 3,000 teens from 10 different learning environments. And one of the things that parents said they want for their children is for them to become, you know, hard workers, for them to be good people, to give. And we work with, you know, high school students. But as I hear this conversation with all of you, you're really laying the foundation early on so that when they become teenagers and are able to articulate themselves about what they think is important, what it means to be active in a democratic society, it starts with the work that you're doing. And so Catherine and I are very pleased you carved out time in your busy schedule to talk about your work, to share with us your hopes, your fears, but also your aspirations, and to pick up some ideas on what we can do from here. So I want to say a thank you again to all of you. Again, this is Gerard Robinson with In Character. I look forward to another conversation. Thank you.